Final report is out on the Cessna that crashed on takeoff from Cleburne, Texas at night in the weather 2 years ago. There's some very interesting findings on this one, so stick with me on FlyWire. Hi, I'm Scott Perdue, and today on FlyWire we're going to look at the final report and some elements from the docket on the crash of the Cessna 205 November 8149 Zulu. The pilot in the left seat was male and held a commercial rating. The passenger in the right seat was female, and she held an ATP. They were on a long cross-country flight with the destination of Granbury, Texas. Started way up in the northeast. Granbury is just southwest of Fort Worth, Texas. They stopped just short of Granbury for fuel at Cleburne. That's KCPT. It was after dark and the weather was IMC. They closely followed the ground track for the RNAV 33 approach, even though they were not on an IFR flight plan. The weather was 300, overcast and 2.5 mile visibility with winds 150 at 5. In other words, it was IMC weather. The last ADSB hit available at the time showed the approximate location of the crash site, but it was 35 minutes after the aircraft passed by on the RNAV 33, so it was a little bit unclear what actually had happened there. The aircraft did refuel at Cleburne, and there was a video image of the aircraft taking off on runway 15. A house near the crash site recorded security video of the crash itself and subsequent fire. And it was night, so it wasn't a great video. It was just that time you could see and hear and then see the fire. A witness that reported seeing the aircraft at low altitude in a right bank at a high rate of speed, and the engine sounded like it was at a high power setting. The previous video recording, by the way, I wanted to say, was security video. Between the accident impact and the ensuing fire, there was not much left of the airplane to make determinations, and the investigators were unable to determine which pilot was manipulating the flight controls at impact. No pre-impact issues were found with flight control continuity or with engine operation, and the vacuum pump showed no pre-impact anomalies, so everything appeared to be working on the airplane. A performance evaluation was conducted as part of the investigation, and it determined that the airplane tracked the extended center line of the runway for a while and then began a right turn. About 20 seconds later, the airplane began a rapid right turn descent. During that descent, the pitch decreased to about minus 10 degrees, and the bank angle increased to 60 degrees. Ultimately, the descent rate posted around 11,000 feet per minute. And if you don't know, put the number on that makes sense. That's 125 miles an hour down. That's the descent rate. Before departure, they received an IFR clearance to Granbury with an initial heading of 090 and an assigned altitude of 3,000 feet. The left seat pilot was listed as the pilot in command on the IFR flight plan. There was no radio contact, no communications with ATC between the ATC and the aircraft after the departure. The weather at departure was slightly different than the approach, with winds now at 160 at 7, again 300 overcast and 2.5 mile visibility. A NOAA radio sonde was taken about 5 minutes after the crash, fairly close to Cleburne, and it noted the cloud layer near the accident site was 400 to 4,200 feet AGL, with light wind shear between 800 and 2,200 feet AGL. The maximum altitude reached by the accident aircraft was 1,775 feet MSL, or 921 feet AGL, so right in that wind shear layer. It is likely that the aircraft entered that turbulent layer shortly after starting the right turn that preceded the accident. Okay, trying to match it up about the performance profile. Autopsies were performed on the occupants at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's Office, and blunt force trauma from the impact was determined as the cause of death for both people. The exam for the left seat commercially rated pilot detected no evidence of significant disease or the presence of any tested for drugs in the system. For the ATP-rated passenger, no evidence of significant natural disease was found. However, quetiapine and hydroxyzine were detected in the liver, but not the blood. Diphenhydramine and dextromethorphan and dextrofan were detected in the liver and the blood. Quetiapine is a prescription antipsychotic used to treat schizophrenia or acute episodes of manic depression associated with bipolar disorder. Additionally, it is prescribed as part of a multi-drug treatment, a cocktail, if you will, of major depressive disorder. Off-label in low doses, it's used to treat insomnia, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and anxiety. There are cognitive and motor skill issues associated with these drugs. Hydroxyzine is a prescription drug to treat anxiety and itching due to allergies. Adverse reactions include cardiac rhythm and abnormalities, drowsiness, and confusion. And both quetiapine and hydroxyzine are considered by the FAA as a do not issue and do not fly drug and are disqualifiers for medical. Diphenhydramine is an over-the-counter sedating antihistamine used in various sleep aids and cold and allergy products. It can cause drowsiness, impaired reaction, attention issues, and memory loss. The FAA states that pilots should not fly within 60 hours of use. Dextromethorphan is an over-the-counter suppressant found in numerous cough syrups and cold medications. And the FAA states pilots should not fly within 5 dosage periods or intervals of use. Dextrofan is a metabolite of this drug, meaning that it breaks down into dextrofan from the original dextromorphan. The probable cause was found to be an in-flight loss of control and as a result of spatial disorientation in night IMC. Review of the left seat pilot's logbook showed 26.9 hours of night flying since October 18, 2016. Apparently that's about the time they started flying. 2.8 hours of actual instrument and 0.4 hours of simulated instrument. Total flight time was 860 hours, and he held a commercial single engine and a multi-engine land certificate and also a helicopter rating. Additionally, he held instrument, airplane, and a helicopter instrument ratings as well. His medical certificate was a Class 2 without waivers or limitations. The right seat ATP-rated pilot had not flown small aircraft in over 5 months because they were doing a initial training in the Phenom 300 for a Part 135 operator. She held single-engine land and sea, multi-engine land ratings, and an instrument rating, airplane rating. Of course she does. She has an ATP. And an instructor rating for single-engine airplanes. Her medical was a Class 1 without limitation or waiver. She had a total of 72.4 hours of night flying, 14.8 hours of actual instrument, and 73.8 hours of simulated instrument out of an approximate total of about 2,320 hours total time. This is an in-depth summary of the final report. I didn't find much more in the docket documents that would add to this or my original report on this crash. I did the video for this report, original report after the crash, and the docket revealed details that were unavailable at the time. And what I found unresolvable at the time was the time discrepancy between the approach flown and the runway 33 at Cleburne and the last ADS-B hit. We know now that the pilots refueled the airplane and then took off runway 15. It was a takeoff in low IMC at night. Frankly, that's the worst of all possible setups for spatial disorientation. My read of the situation at the time was that spatial disorientation was a major factor in the accident. The NTSB stated that as the probable cause, but in my opinion, they didn't go very far into the other factors that played an important role in this particular accident. And that is what I want to talk about now. The fact that the airplane flew into Cleburne after dark in IMC conditions is a huge telltale, okay? A significant portion of the flight that afternoon and evening was likely scud running at very low altitudes. As I mentioned in the first video, they actually flew very close to my house on the way to Cleburne, and just looking at the ADS-B track. And for me, it was IMC conditions in that afternoon and evening. I wouldn't take off into it, much less scud run for hundreds of miles. Then there was the RNAV 33 approach into Cleburne at night. They were not on an IFR flight plan. They were not under ATC control. They were not cleared for the approach, and most definitely they were flying in cloud. Okay, there's no clearances, no separation, nothing like that. That alone would have resulted in the FAA revoking the ATP-rated pilot's license for a period. She was an instructor, and instructors are supposed to be held to a slightly higher standard. These actions demonstrate several of the hazardous attitudes that the FAA points out for both pilots, in my opinion. The first up is anti-authority. The rules just don't apply to me. It is apparent that both pilots believe their skill level adequate to the task, and it is equally apparent that that idea was grossly incorrect. Like it or not, but most of the rules in flying exist because someone paid for their lives. Rules are a way of legislating common sense, and I'll be the first to admit that that doesn't always work. And in this case, that's exactly what happened. It's unfortunate enough, but that's it. Next up is impulsivity. I think this is a tag-along to several of these attitudes, but in this case, I suspect that taking off into the clouds on that dark night turned frightening very fast. Their first impulse was to turn towards they felt was safety. They turned right towards Granbury. That's where they wanted to go. Screw that going to 090 with the clearance that they had to 090 and climb to 3,000 feet. They didn't even try that. The runway heading was 150, and that was the best choice for their survival. When you experience spatial disorientation, you must limit the movement of your head, the airplane, etc. Fly straight and level, level off, get your bearings, and then establish one small change and fix something. That is 150. I've got to control, and then you climb up to altitude and then turn heading or something like that. And one thing at a time. Declare an emergency if you have to. There's no shame in declaring an emergency. You're a human, and in this instance, you must consciously overcome the weird attitude inputs coming into your senses. And I got to foot stomp this. Disorientation, this spatial disorientation will kill you. For the left seater, offloading the task of radio communication to the right seat would have been a fantastic thing to do. Frankly, that is the definition of crew resource management. And if they had done that, then they wouldn't have been overloaded on tasks. Okay, those lessons, the experience required to choose the right path to survival, were missed by both pilots, but in particular the more experienced right seater. She could have influenced the outcome of this flight in a positive way. And that question is why? Okay. Third attitude here is invulnerability. The last two flights these pilots made were perfect examples of it can't happen to me. This Cessna thing is a piece of cake. If flying the weather, it's not a big deal. Well, I'll tell you, I've been flying my whole adult life, and frankly, the condition that these pilots toyed with scares the heck out of me. Their actual weather time and even simulated weather time is cringingly low. What I see there, and I'm sorry to note this, but is a complete lack of understanding of the dangers of IMC flying, of the possibilities of spatial disorientation, and a plan on how to mitigate it if it happens to you. Just because you pass the test and you have the rating doesn't mean you can keep the ball centered and stay upright. It's not a simple thing. Passing the IR test is a license to learn, just like having a pilot's license. Approach these real-world lessons with an abundance of caution. Don't stick your neck out when you don't have to. Fourth here is macho, the I can do it attitude. Perhaps you can under the right circumstances, but the more intelligent question is, in my opinion, should you? When you know enough about yourself and the dangers to say, not today, then you're maturing as a pilot. Okay, you can say that as a test. For whatever reason, and you're going to see these things happen to you. So when you say, no, I'm going to give it a slip today, whatever reason, they pressed on, and that was a bad decision. Flying a single-engine airplane, minimally IFR equipped, and the most serious IMC conditions is a very poor decision. I would hope you don't do it. Personally detest the idea of placing my life on a vacuum-driven AI. I just don't do it. I change them, whatever airplane I have. I hate those things. Moreover, I want at least 2 other electric attitude references that I can use before I enter clouds. Okay, call me a wuss. I don't care. I want to live a long time, and taking off into that mess just doesn't meet my criteria for flight into challenging conditions. And that criteria, I've said it before in other videos, essentially is, am I going to save democracy by doing this flight? I'm not sitting nuclear alert anymore, so the answer is always no. Find a hotel or a couch, okay, until the conditions are conducive for that. I cannot say whether resignation, the 5th hazardous attitude, was a player in this particular accident. We have no way of knowing that, but it could be. The left seat pilot was a man and older, but he was less experienced. Okay, the right seat pilot was female and younger, but a more experienced pilot. She was also an instructor. So actually I want to end up here to come at it from this perspective, from this angle. I've been in the instruction game for a fairly long time now, and I don't do much in the way of initial private pilot training or higher certificates or ratings. I've done a few, but my focus has been largely on type-specific, recurrent, and specialized training. For instance, UPRT has been a focus of mine for a very long time. Loss of control in flight is perennially one of the top 3 killers. That's what happened in this instance, and that's kind of my bailiwick that I specialize in. My instructor philosophy has always been that people learn by making mistakes. We all do. Take a go at a maneuver or a task, note and fix the problem areas, because you're going to have them. Everybody does. You're human. I generally tell my students that I let you make a mistake and take it as far as you will, trying to fix it up until the point where I won't be able to save it anymore. Okay? My basic goal is to return the airplane to where we got it in reasonably the same shape we left in. I think personally that defines safety. Sometimes you don't have much time for niceties. Here's an example. I was flying with my best friend. We'd gone through pilot training together, the FTU, etc. Spent a long time together, and I went to visit him after I retired from the Air Force. He had been out of the Air Force for quite a while, and he had a 150, and we went flying in the 150. The runway was a bit bumpy, and he forced it into the air a bit early. Okay, I sensed a stall coming on, and I gently pushed the yoke forward to gain airspeed, to limit our climb, our pitch rate, and let's level and gain airspeed. I didn't say my airplane. In fact, I didn't say a thing until landing when he brought it up. Okay, he hadn't been flying much lately, much less with 2 people in the 150, which is the 150 is a very low-powered airplane. Okay, especially with a density altitude of about 4,000 feet, and this was pretty high in mountainous terrain. I apologized and told him that I just had to make sure we didn't stall. Fortunately, he wasn't mad at me, but was probably a bit disappointed in himself. The thing is I don't judge people or call them names. There's no reason to do that. We do this for fun, so let's learn. There's no stigma with learning. But I'm not careless with physics. Flying airplanes can kill you, and what I'm saying is, as an instructor, even as a basic pilot, if you know what the situation is, intervene when it's most necessary. The other thing I do is I don't yell at my students unless the situation is becoming critical, and I deem that's the only way to get their attention before going too far. And that happens sometimes. I think there are about 5 ways to teach and to lead, for that matter, and you need to know how to employ all of those. Okay? It's tools in your tool bag. In this particular accident, we don't know who was flying. We also don't know what was going through either one of their minds. But we do know that both were instructors. And we know that the non-flying pilot did not intervene. Perhaps their situational awareness was so low that they didn't recognize the danger in the situation. Perhaps their experience levels had not provided them with enough exposure to real-world conditions, so they didn't recognize that either. And then when they reached into their clue bag, there was nothing there. Yeah, I did a video on this. It's called the 3-bag theory, if you want to check it out. If you're sitting right seat and you're a pilot, frankly, I think it is your job to back up the pilot flying. Okay, maintain your awareness of what they're doing and what the airplane is doing. Okay, are you going in the right direction? Is there a problem developing? and pay attention to the threats. And I mean, this is just basic survival. It's not time to read a magazine or scroll on your phone. Okay, be in the present. Help fly the airplane, even if you're not flying, even if you don't say anything. Just keep your tabs on what you're doing. Keep your head in the game. Finally, the third thing that jumped out at me in this particular accident was the drug use by the right seater. I have a hard time getting around that. Perhaps she was not participating in flying in any way and was on those drugs for a temporary situation. But if she did participate in the flight in any way, she had violated her responsibilities as a pilot. And to me, that's very worrisome. The do not fly prescription drugs are a problem. It is not just that she was in an airplane with those drugs in her system. The underlying issue those drugs are supposed to suppress are disqualifying. She possessed a Class 1 medical, and I have a hard time not seeing that as a violation. Sorry, that's just the way it is. It's a serious violation which you really can't overcome. It's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Given the side effects of these drugs, it's quite likely that was a factor. Or it may be even the underlying reason why she didn't react. There's reasons why it's a do not fly, do not issue drug. The hard truth is that she probably could have had a great life by staying out of aviation if indeed she had the underlying condition the drugs were designed to treat. If she did not have that underlying condition, well then taking these drugs and flying was a huge mistake, okay? Because she was put into a situation by maybe somebody else's decision where she could have intervened and survived, but she wasn't. She was incapacitated at that point. Life is filled with hard choices, and my heart breaks knowing the tragedy that ensued after the fatal decision this couple made to take off into the murk at Cleburne Airport that dark night. Crappy weather. The bottom line is it's only a 30 or 40-minute car ride between Granbury and Cleburne. Go home. Come back the next day when the weather's clear. If you find yourself in a situation like this, ask yourself, is my life worth this trip? In peacetime flying, frankly, I just don't think so. GA flying, I don't hardly see any situation where it's worth it to go off into conditions like this. Most rules in flying are written in blood. Don't reinvent the wheel. Hope you learned something from this video. Frankly, it was a little bit hard to make. Sorry, I just have to say what I see here. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on FlyWire.